So hello and good afternoon. Welcome. First off, I hope everyone's continuing to stay safe and healthy out there. And I wanted to thank you for joining us for today's webcast, Excel is Not an ERP. Here's a quick look at our agenda today. I will go ahead and walk us through some brief introductions, and then we'll spend a majority of our time today with our guest and wrap things up with some Q&A from you guys, the audience. So on that note, if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please don't hesitate to ask that via the Q&A or the chat portals. And if possible, we'll work them in during the presentation. Otherwise, we do have that dedicated time at the end. Here's a little bit more about Liberty Technology Advisors. We are a 100% independent business advisory firm. We're headquartered in the Chicagoland area with clients throughout the United States and globe. Our team of expert consultants are dedicated to helping our clients improve their business performance. And at our core, we aim to GSD, get stuff done. And we do that by aligning people, processes, and technology to deliver results to our clients. Here's a quick look at some of those specific services from our ERP and BPR services to value-added services like interim CIO and CTO services. We're really here to help you do your business better. Today, we are lucky to be joined by LTA consultant and controller, Amy Schneider. Here's a quick look at Amy's bio. She has spent several years at professional service firms in accounting and HR roles. So with that, I'd like to welcome Amy.
Thank you, Brad. So I'm really excited today to talk about the one thing that I love and hate equally, which is Excel. It is probably one of the greatest innovations within the business sector in the last century, but it comes at a much higher risk than most managers ever realize. So let's talk about how Excel is not an ERP system. Who is using Excel and why? Our consultants see every department within every industry and almost every company using Excel on a pretty regular basis. Companies originally started using it to replace the paper spreadsheets and old bulky software like Minitab and Lotus 123. Lotus is long gone. Minitab is now primarily used by statisticians, which is where it should be. And Excel quickly gained traction because Microsoft made it accessible, affordable, and relatively easy to use. So it's now ranked as one of the top hard skills that recruiters are looking for, and we need to stop this. As a manager or an executive, you have so much going on an everyday basis that you should not be trying to figure out if your employees are Excel gurus. And how did we actually get to the point where Excel is one of the primary tools that companies are using? If you were to ask most companies, they can't pinpoint an exact day when this happened because it just evolves over time. When an issue arises within a company's ERP system, most employees can figure out how to export the data out of that system and slice and dice it to get the information that they need. So this eventually expands it into kind of a second system of record. And then you're creating different side buckets of data in order to make real operational decisions. And I hate to admit this, but I've heard so many accountants say, let's admit it, if it's not in Excel, it's not getting done. So this leads into the risk that a company faces when you're using Excel. When you've transitioned into that second system of record, you've basically stopped all interdepartmental communications. Your inventory is not going to be communicating with purchasing or your e-commerce platform anymore. The e-commerce platform is not going back into the CRM system, which means that maybe your sales department has no idea who your customers are. These communication lags roll into a much bigger problem over time, and they start affecting your bottom line. You're going to have increased stockouts, loss of advertising sales because you don't know who your loyal customers are, excessive labor expenses, just in general by poor tracking and the amount of time that your employees are spending working in Excel, and excessive costs generated from lost inventory, which is a topic I could spend all day talking about the phenomenon of lost inventory and how manufacturing companies manage to lose inventory. And just for those of you that might be unaware, I'm not talking about like lost a handful of bolts. There are companies out there that are losing whole vehicles, and that is a very big risk. So, and that's just one risk on Excel. All the other risks combine into lack of internal controls. Most people think this just means accounting. It does not. Your inventory, your sales, purchasing, almost every department is at risk if you're using Excel with no controls. Your proprietary data could be lost. All it takes is one employee to copy your Excel workbook and it's gone. Many people like to use passwords and password protection in Excel. That is not foolproof. There are softwares that can crack those passwords, where passwords can easily be guessed. Most companies are probably using the password ABC company and the year. So it might be password protected within your business, but it's not going to stop somebody who really wants access to your proprietary data. And then compliance issues are another big risk. Every industry usually has compliance issues, even if you don't think about it. These can be as simple as GDPR and the California Consumer Privacy Act, which is governing all that data that you're collecting about your customers. CMMC is a new one that we're seeing in the cybersecurity world. Use tax for accounting, S5 audits, or the good manufacturing practice certifications, on top of many more. Then the other biggest risk is the potential for compounded errors. There are situations where a simple formula error can be carried forward for months before somebody catches it. The biggest occurrence we always hear about is when it happens in the accounting department, and then somebody gives those errors to the stakeholders. But this really happens everywhere. It could be your inventory that's rolling forward with an incorrect number, or pretty much anything. So when everything in your ERP system is at 100% capacity and working, you're going to instantly have those real-time updates, automated compliance, strong internal controls from the start, complete comprehensive audit logs and records, and so much more. So all of this leads into the controversial question. Can you live in a world without Excel? And is there an ERP system that works 100% of the time? I firmly believe the answer is yes, absolutely. LTA has assisted numerous companies to improve their ERP systems and processes to cut out Excel. When we're hired for a project, one of the first steps our consultants do is assess your current state and determine what your end goals are, not only for each department, but also each stakeholder. Our assessment does not necessarily mean that a company will need a completely new ERP system. Oftentimes after this assessment, we can determine that you need an upgrade. Maybe it's just user training, an IT roadmap, some type of third-party accessory, which like a fleet management or a point of sale system there, or maybe just a re-implementation of your ERP system could be an appropriate step. But the fact of eliminating Excel is one of the things our consultants will discuss with you during every step of our process, no matter what your end goals are. This means during the assessment, we'll look at that current state and what you're actually using Excel for now and how. If you go on to do a software selection, we're going to discuss your needs requirements, and we're going to ensure that Excel is not one of your needs. And then if we do an implementation of any type, our consultants like to make sure that all the proper onboarding, training, and change management happen. So the future state would only be using Excel to slice and dice data for the one-off fancy report if needed. There's not going to be any more data updating, tracking, pivot tables, Power BI, any of those actions happening to get operational information. You are going to be able to completely outlaw all of those old processes. So a quick real life example of this magical Excel free world that you guys probably aren't buying yet is we went into a national engineering firm, civil engineering, about 50 million in annual revenue. They were using a tier 2 ERP software on-prem, had about 250 licensed users. A brief summary of the users' opinions after our assessment concluded that they only had 2 positive components. They really liked their time entry module and their project management module. In their lengthy list of negatives, the IT department had set up SQL flows to basically get all of the operations reportings for employee utilization and just anything you could think of. IT had set it up. The accounting department was 90% Excel for all important tasks: payroll, financials, employee performance, fleet management, fixed assets, expense reports. If you think of it, it was probably in Excel. This company was manually running their revenue generation on a monthly basis and really had very little insight in between those monthly runs. They had no mobile capabilities set up that the ERP offered, and most employees were out in the field every day and were asking for these mobile capabilities to make their job easier. And one of their last negatives was that their ERP system was known as the accounting software. This means that many departments did not sign on, did not use it, didn't think there was any potential value or use out of it, and that's very concerning. So when companies get to this state, it's very easy to become complacent and not realize it. We can shrug off all day long that we're using Excel and our ERP system isn't doing what it needs to do. Even stakeholders get used to this current state over time. And usually it takes a trigger for companies to consider a change. Sometimes it's something drastic like an M&A, and sometimes it's hiring the right new employees that kind of become the squeaky wheel to get stuff done. In this particular firm, they had several accounting employees retire, and the new employees pushed the initiative to the stakeholders that this ERP was not getting the job done for them. So our assessment of the current state showed that this tier 2 ERP software was actually still the best fit for this company. It was appropriate for their size, their industry, and it was going to allow growth. The stakeholders had expressed interest in reducing overhead operations overall and ensuring that there would be a great return on investment for any ERP system that was, or project that was to happen. Our recommendation was actually to do a re-implementation of this software. This would allow changes needed to set up the system properly and clean up some of that erroneous data. This allowed the company to implement the mobile features that they wanted, new modules for departments like sales, got a CRM system, HR got a module, they actually went to expense reporting module and fleet management. And then they were able to move into the cloud, which is a big thing when you have on-prem. The other thing that we recommended was to ensure that all employees received training on the new system and procedures. This is a step that a lot of companies like to avoid due to time or budgetary concerns, but it is vitally important. You want to ensure that all of your staff knows how to use this new system and they don't revert back to their old Excel ways out of frustration because they can't figure out the new system. This also might mean that in general, there are smaller changes in that future state that you're not thinking about at a high level. So before, when your accounts payable clerk was entering the invoice manually and then filing it away, now it might be all digital, and that accounts payable clerk is going to have to learn a new routine in their job. Small tasks like that are going to affect all users. And so this is why training is just so important during this process. You do not want to revert back to where you came from. So after the re-implementation of the ERP system, the future state of this firm is looking great. They now have scalability for growth, which as an engineering firm, they are nonstop growing. They have one source of truth. When their CFO goes to the president and tells him a number, somebody else can go find that exact number straight out of their ERP system. It's not in somebody's Excel who hasn't synced on OneDrive, and who knows how they got there. And then, as I said a little bit before, the user acceptance is renewed across the board with the ERP system. That training is going to help increase the user acceptance and get it up there. And that's very important for going forward. So that's a quick rundown of a real world example. And if any of these concerns sound familiar to your company, please feel free to email me and we can talk about how Excel is impacting your operations and offer a consultation.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. It looks like we did have a couple questions come in as you were speaking, and I'm going to open it up to everyone. If you have questions about Excel, ERP, or anything that Amy talked about, please go ahead and submit those, and we'll go ahead and start working our way through them. So the first one I have here is, you mentioned about the security aspect or the lack of security in Excel. And we do use some of those security features, but it sounds like you're saying they might not be reliable or robust. Is that the case? And really to what extent?
Yeah, I would say that they're probably not as reliable as you think they are. Like I said, it's very easy for even me, who is not an advanced IT user, to go and copy somebody's Excel workbook and then download a software to crack your password, and I'm in. When you start getting into ERP systems, you're obviously going to have a lot more security in the background set up. And then just also in the foreground, you are going to have all of those internal controls in place, and you're going to know that somebody in your HR department is not going to be able to access another department's module unless it's truly valid for their position.
Great. Next one we have on here is, have you run into any company that has, or heard of any company that's banned Excel use, or do you see this as a future trend?
I don't know about officially banned Excel use, but there are definitely a lot of companies out there that do not want you using it for anything on a regular basis. No reconciliations in Excel. You have a one-off report, you definitely can slice and dice your information, but that's about it. The thing that we usually hear the most is people say, don't update Excel. So when you download that data and you do something with it, you should not be updating it every week. You shouldn't be rolling it forward. It should be a one-time report.
Okay. We'll keep moving along. So you mentioned getting rid of Excel completely, and just now you talked about downloading it and slicing and dicing it. This question looks like it addresses that. Their team has decades of experience with Excel, so won't we be setting them back by having our whole team learn a new system?
I would say no. Of course, learning a new system is going to initially be time consuming and a little bit of a learning curve, but think of all the time that you're going to save because when you go into Excel, even if you're a guru, it takes a little bit of time to get that report to look the way you want it or the pivot table to format right. And all of that time is what's going to really add up.
Got it. All right, next one on here. Is there a typical company profile or companies typically using Excel versus ERP, whether it's size, industry, etc.?
No, I don't think there is a typical company profile. I mean, LTA works a lot in manufacturing, but we've saw it in every company. We've saw other consulting firms just like us who are using Excel, small, large. You would be surprised. I think because it is such a known product, it is in every industry at every size.
Great. What is the smallest sized company in terms of revenue and number of employees that really need an ERP system?
So I don't like to limit all the way down by revenue size or number of employees. I mean, LTA, we're a small firm in number of employees, and we use an ERP system. It's called BQE Core. I also think that revenue, once you hit a certain dollar point, your needs are greater, but it really cannot be defined by revenue or number of employees.
Okay. And I think this next question, I think, is getting back towards the world, or to the question earlier with regards to the world of, you know, getting rid of Excel completely. In your eyes, is there an acceptable world where you can be using Excel and ERP together?
Yes and no. I think this goes back to the question earlier about you can slice and dice Excel, you can make some reports. If your ERP is really the right fit, you're not going to be relying on Excel. I hesitate on this because I do know that some people are really into Power BI or Crystal reports, and that's a little bit of a different issue.
Okay. Next one we just had come in. Can you use a standardized ERP, or do you need a customized one? And if so, when do you need to customize? When do you need a customized system?
Sure. So I like to take the conservative approach and say that you should always use the standard as much as possible. When people start getting into customization, that's when things go wrong, or you start getting that tribal knowledge that goes away when a person retires. Try to keep it standard. Sometimes customization really, in my real life example, talked about modules. These are still completely out of the box modules. It's just purchasing them from the software company.
Great. If anyone has questions, please continue to feel free to submit those. It looks like the last one I have right now in the queue is, what do you recommend for data integration teams, specifically those that might be ETLing data and or leveraging some self-service BI solutions?
I don't know if I have a in-depth answer for that one off the top of my head. I will have to, whoever sent that, please feel free to shoot me that by email because you sent it anonymous, and I would love to get you an answer.
Perfect. All right, well, I will put out the call again. If anyone else has any questions, please submit them now. And like Amy already mentioned, if you want to get in touch to talk further about either anything you saw today or talk more about LTA's services, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our email information as well as our phone numbers are on the screen here. We will be sending out a recording afterwards to everyone who's attended, so please feel free to circulate that in networks where it makes sense. And if we don't have any other questions, looks like we had one more come in here. How does the migration, this one's for you, Amy, obviously. How does the migration from Excel to ERP involve process changes?
Sure. So this is kind of like what I talked about with your AP clerk example. When you are just entering the data in Excel, you're also probably doing a lot of manual processes. You're entering in the AP invoice into your ERP system, but when you're actually tracking those vendor invoices, it might be being dumped into Excel and then you're having to update Excel. Whereas when you go into an ERP, a lot of the process is going to be automated and digital. So your ERP clerk is now just going to enter the invoice, digitally attach the file, or if they have a fancy software, some of them are scanning the invoice and you're not even typing anymore. Just every little process like that that you can think of is now going to be automated. Same for the financial statements. Your accountant is not going line by line entering financial statements in Excel anymore. They're just hitting a button and there's your income statement, fully accurate, down to the penny.
Great. All right, well, if anyone does have a question that comes up, whether it's later today, tomorrow, next week, our contact information is on the screen. And like I said, we'll be emailing you guys out a recording and some follow-ups. But I want to thank everyone for joining us today and thank Amy for her presentation. And we look forward to hopefully having you all join us on our next webcast.
Thank you, Brad. Have a great day.